Hello, friends, and welcome into an all-new episode of the Pack-A-Day Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on X at Andy Herman NFL. You can follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. But more importantly, I am joined right now, not in person, but virtually, by Perri Goldstein, Alex Strouf, the two most amazing people on this episode. Alex, Perri, how the heck are you doing?
I'm emotionally exhausted.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, Perri. Good way to put it.
It's been a whirlwind 2 days. The league year hasn't even started yet, right? The league year starts when you are listening to this podcast on Wednesday, March 13th. This is this opening of the league year, and we've already had 2 days worth of crazy free agency news. I don't think I can remember a year where the Packers have been this involved this early. I think fans have been begging for them to do a lot for a long time. I don't know how much I like it. We're gonna get to it, but it's a lot. It's been a lot.
It's been chaotic, but it's been, and to your point, Perri, like never to this level, right? You don't cut two of your longest players on the same day very often. So on top of the big signings they made, yeah, it's been a chaotic 48 hours or so when this comes out. But what a blast! The NFL rules all, man. On a big week of college basketball and all the in between, the NFL rules all.
It really does. It was absolutely chaotic. It was a whirlwind. To your point, Perri, it is not even the start of free agency yet, not even the start of the league year yet. They haven't even officially, the Devondre Campbell news that they're going to release him feels like 6 weeks ago at this point. And they haven't even officially released him yet because they can't do that until the new league year starts so that they can June 1st or put a June 1st designation on him. Let's start with the clearly the big story from today, which is something because there's been like a million big stories in the last 48 hours. But Aaron Jones officially becoming a member of the Minnesota Vikings. And this one actually is official because they don't have to wait. They can sign him because Green Bay released him. They did not use a June 1st release. And even if they did, they could anyway. Either way, he is a Minnesota Viking in classic Packers Vikings form. Brett Favre. I know everyone was very upset about Dean Lowry, Ryan Longwell, Greg Jennings. It just seems to go on and on forever and ever. A variety of different Packers, Darius Smith, so many. It doesn't even matter at this point. But now the latest in that list of Packers to Vikings turncoats, or whatever we want to call it, is Aaron Jones. And it's I said online on Tuesday, the loser in this is not necessarily the Green Bay Packers. The loser in this is not necessarily Aaron Jones. The loser in this is the Packer fans that once again have to see the nauseating sight of one of our all-time favorite players in the absolute worst color combination known to football fans everywhere, purple and yellow. Perri, I will start with you. Your visceral gut reaction to Aaron Jones becoming a member of the Minnesota Vikings.
I mean, it sucks. Like, it obviously sucks. I mean, do you want me to be like objective and analytical about it, or do you want me to be a fan for a second?
You do you.
Because like the fan in me, it sucks. I mean, my initial reaction to because I feel like this was a long day of people like riding the wave of information too with the Aaron Jones release and the contract back and forth and some of like the Twitter nonsense, which I really genuinely try to like kind of block out, especially like I also, like, for those that don't know, have like a regular full-time job, so I'm not like really on Twitter all that much during the day, which like probably is to like the better of my like mental health, and so like my initial gut reaction is like, well, of course it's a division rival, and like I think there are a lot of reasons why that happens. Like obviously they know a player the best, they've seen him tons, they know his value the most of anyone in the league. I mean, Aaron Jones is like a big enough name that I think people in the league know him, but like who knows him better than a team that's been wrecked by him like twice a game, or twice a season every year, right? So it makes sense. From a fandom perspective, Andy, I mean, you said it right. Like it sucks, and now the Packers are going to have to play him twice next season. And again, I think the contract value is really the stinger to me, because when the numbers came out was where I really got confused by it. Because, and like, look, agents, you know, do their best to make it look as nice as possible for their players. Like, they want to make it look like they got the best deal possible. So when it comes out that Aaron Jones gets a 1-year, $7 million deal, that's his agent trying to make it look like he got the most possible, right? It's really not that. It's a $6 million base, like $1 million in incentives, right? So, okay, fine. That's what it is. But still, in my mind, I'm like, really, Packers? Like, you couldn't give Aaron Jones like $6 million at base, like $1 million in incentives? Like, if that's what he was asking for, like, you don't think that he's valued at that? And I know that there's more to it for the Packers, right? Like, he's released, he's clear, there's no cap issues for the Vikings. Like, there's a lot more that to take into consideration with the Packers with a restructure versus just like picking up a player. Like, I do understand that. But it was hard for me to stomach how low that number was, and to know that the Packers released him because they asked him for a pay cut. Like, how much they lowballed him. I know it's a business, and I know that he's going to be 30, et cetera, et cetera. Like, Andy, you did a really great breakdown, if you haven't listened to it yet, on a previous episode of like all the reasons why this release could make sense from like a business perspective. And like, you can talk yourself into it, but seeing that number of like why the Viking, like of what the Vikings are paying him, I just feel like, and you guys can tell me if I'm wrong here, I don't know. Like, I just think the Packers could have done it and it wouldn't have been wrong in any sense of the imagination. You know, they have the money, like they have the room. It's Aaron Jones. Like, if he ends up missing next season, so be it. $7 million. Like, I don't know. That to me is like, woof. It just, and I usually am like very in lockstep with Goot and his decisions. And like, I understand that they drop players a year early and they usually make like very much the right decisions when it comes to these in previous times, especially with beloved players. And I try to like take that out of the equation. But seeing what Aaron Jones was able to do down the stretch for $7 million.
Yeah. Alex, before we get to you, I just want to kind of run through the entire timeline, because I think it's important to just, because first of all, I think it's just important, period. Second of all, I saw so many different misinformation and tweets that just didn't understand the exact, I guess, order of operations of how all this all went down. And this is obviously mostly on reporting by Matt Schneidman and The Athletic. But here's basically what it seems like. And I think the first piece of this that we have to remember, the two pieces, I think, is that one, we have to remember that Aaron Jones took a pretty significant pay cut just a season ago. I think that is a very important precursor to this. Number two is, I do think we have to remember, and I think that first one is from an Aaron Jones side of things. The second thing from a Packers side of things is, yes, Aaron Jones was unequivocally amazing when healthy last year.
Yeah.
But hamstring injury week 1, knee injury week 10, re-aggravation of the hamstring injury in that final playoff game, to the point where we don't even know if he would have played in the NFC Championship game if Green Bay would have got there. When you see a player that is starting to hit that age 30 and has multiple injuries, that could play a factor in this clearly. But after that, that's sort of the preamble. Once we get to this, the order of operations seems to be that Green Bay went to Aaron Jones, asked him to take a pay cut. And it sounds like the agent came back and said, here's where we're at. And it sounds like they made some headway at some point. They were getting closer. And then it got to the point eventually where Green Bay made a final offer to Aaron Jones and said, this is our final offer. And then basically Aaron Jones and his agent, Drew Rosenhaus, said no. And then at that point, and this was last week, it sounds like Friday-ish of last week, Green Bay rescinded the offer at that point, said they were going to go in a different direction, start focusing on free agents. Immediately on Monday in legal tampering period, they go after Josh Jacobs. And that was basically the end of it. And even though the Jones thing didn't happen until later, this was not Jones was upset because of signing Jacobs. This was not the Packers found Jacobs, so they decided to move on from Jones. It sounds like things broke down Friday, and then on Monday, everything just happened all in one fell swoop, where they signed Jacobs, released Jones, and then go from there. And then today, Matt Schneidman reports that Green Bay's offer that they were looking for was a little less than $4 million in base salary and $2 million in incentives. So a little less than $6 million total. But again, $4 million base is like, that's all he's guaranteed. If he doesn't get those incentives, that could be a lot less. Vikings, $6 million base, $1 million with incentives. I'm willing to bet, because remember, this happened Friday when they're having this negotiation. Maybe Jones and his agent just ultimately valued incorrectly. I doubt that that's the case. Rosenhaus is on top of all of this stuff. My belief is that if the Packers probably on Friday would have went to Jones and said $6 million base with $1 million incentives, my gut tells me this is not anything that Schneidman or The Athletic reported. This is not something I know to be a fact, but my gut tells me is Aaron probably would have accepted that. And then to your point, Perri and Alex, what I want to get your opinion on is the difference here, right? And this was also, again, the final offer from Green Bay, according to Matt Schneidman, was $4 million base, $2 million incentives, and the Vikings was $6 million base, $1 million incentives. So you're looking at a difference of potentially $1 million there, or maybe $2 million, depending on how you want to look at the incentives. But either way, the different, like $2 million in a salary cap as large as it is a pretty insignificant amount of money. I pointed out, if they release Royce Newman right now, that is the difference in the contract demands between Aaron Jones and the Green Bay Packers. It's a pretty small gap to fit through. And this clearly tells me that the Packers had probably wanted to move on from Aaron Jones unless they got it completely their way on a very, very, very friendly team deal, and decided that it was probably best to go in a different direction. And Alex, that's where I will take it, or I'll let you take it over from there before I give any of my opinions on it, because I know you've had to sit and listen to Perri and I talk for 12 minutes. So the floor is yours, my friend.
No, I like listening to other people talk, because I obviously have had to do a lot of that in the last 2 days, every day. So, okay, a couple things based off that, Andy. The Goody and Russ Ball angle, and maybe them wanting to move on from him altogether. My mind goes back to when Goody was asked about Aaron Jones at his end of season presser. And he said he used the word absolutely wanted him back in 2024. And for it to change that quickly based off that little of money makes me wonder if he was lying or if something completely changed in the last couple of weeks, right? And I don't know that we know the answer to that. To go back to Perri's point, and the initial gut reaction is it sucks that he's with the Minnesota Vikings. We have to see him twice a year. And by the way, Andy, a little bit ago, you ran through a bunch of names of former Packers that ended up in Minnesota. You forgot about the legendary Chandon Sullivan. So come on.
That's on me.
Yeah, it is. It is.
That's
You're right.
me.
But nonetheless, yeah, this stinks. I wish more for Aaron Jones. I wish more veterans were respected better at the end of their tenure, right? I mean, if we think back to one of Goody's first moves when he took over as GM, he cut Jordy Nelson, right? So, and he still had tread left on the tires, in my opinion, before he went to Oakland. So I feel all sorts of ways about this. I'm happy with the signing and the addition of Josh Jacobs. I think he's going to be a really exciting piece for this team. He seems to be, pretty durable. I know he missed 4 games this year, but still productive behind a bad Vegas offensive line. Obviously, 2 years ago, he was an all-purpose over 2,000-yard guy. So I like the addition. I think you probably improved at running back. I don't know how significantly, but I feel for Aaron Jones. And we're all fans here, right? Like, we all love this guy. He I think back a couple of weeks ago when Jason Kelsey retired from the Eagles. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder who the next long-term Packer to retire a Packer will be. And my mind immediately went to Aaron Jones. And here we are, a week and a half later, and that obviously won't be the case. So there's my ramble, Andy.
My question to you, Andy, when you say that is like, well, they were ready to move on, is like, but why? Because like you can go back to a lot of the players, and like, again, I encourage everyone listening to listen to your episode that was uploaded Tuesday morning, because you go through like a number of the players, Corey Linsley, you mentioned Jordy Nelson, like a bunch of players that they have moved on from that ultimately ended up being the right decision. So there's a predictability here that someone in the front office is doing a good job saying, like, the year early thing, they're there, and again, like, Aaron Jones missed almost the entire season this year. So, like, I'm not sitting here saying, like, he was healthy all year. Look at what he did. He had another 1,000-yard rushing season. Like, this is crazy, right? Like, he missed virtually the entire season. But for 1 year, basically $6 million, you're bringing in a Josh Jacobs who is going to be, likely more of the workhorse and take even more touches, not an A.J. Dillon type running back too, but even more touches. It feels like the perfect, counterbalance to an aging running back who you clearly value, I thought, is beloved to the team, which I guess, I don't know, maybe teams just don't value that like fans do. I'm learning that clearly. You said, to Alex's point, you absolutely want back to your point, the $2 million means literally nothing to this team. I mean, it's not like they are like cash strapped this year. They look at what they just gave Keisean Nixon, which I know we're going to get to. Like, to me, I'm like, something's missing here.
Yep. So here's how I would put it. And let me just be clear before I put my GM hat on for a second. I would have brought him back. If the difference, if Green Bay is like, we're at $4 million plus whatever, if we're at a certain number plus incentives and it's a $2 million difference, I figure out a way to make that difference. Like I said, I would have brought him back. I think it would have been a dynamic 1-2 punch with Josh Jacobs. And I think there's a variety of different ways that you could have made that work. Here's now my GM answer to this. And I tweeted this out, and interestingly enough, a former NFL GM, Randy Miller, who was a Dolphins general manager, liked the tweet because I think he's, again, I put my GM hat on it. And this is just my gut feel. Again, this is not anything that I have a report on or anyone else has reported on or anything like that. When you do see a running back that is about to turn 30, or any player who's about to hit that golden age, and unfortunately that's not a good thing in this situation, but that age of 30, and you do see a player that has 3 different injuries throughout the course of the season, the most injured season that he has had. And my guess, this is just my guess, is that they are watching him rehab and go through everything to fight back, to try to play. There were a couple of those games when he's trying to come back from the hamstring where he didn't quite look like himself. What you're expecting when you see a almost 30-year-old running back who's had that many carries and touches and wear and tear on his body, even though they've taken good care of him up until this point, is that the next turn around the bend is probably going to be worse. It's probably going to get worse. The decline with running backs comes insanely fast. I talked about it yesterday, but the Sean Alexander one, from like MVP to done in a blink of an eye, these things happen for running backs. Ezekiel Elliott hit a wall very, very fast. And you're projecting that that's what's going to happen next. And what I'll add on top of that is what the NFL general manager's job is to do. And I don't even remember if I said this yesterday because I mostly blacked out, I think, for that entire episode. But an NFL general manager's job is to predict what's going to be in that next contract, how well they're going to perform. And the reason that I say that is like when we start getting into scouting players, a lot of people can put on the tape and scout a player and say what they were in college and say whether what they did well, what they did poorly. The hard part is projecting what they're going to actually become in the NFL. And the same thing goes with fan favorite players. We can all look when Aaron Jones was healthy last year and see how good he was. The hard part is projecting what is that going to look like over the course of the next couple seasons. And clearly the Packers, for right or wrong, felt like that next couple years is probably going to get worse, more injured, more downtime, and they felt it was better to go in a different direction and utilize that money elsewhere than to bring that player back and have all of those risks that are associated with it. That's my gut feel on it.
Yeah, no, it's fair. And like, I feel like the recency bias, right? Like if his stretch of great games had been weeks like 1 through 6, and he spent like the whole rest of the season hurt, like we might be thinking about this differently. But I feel like because the end of his season was as great as it was, we're remembering Aaron Jones for the end, like what that was, which I'm glad, I'm glad that that's how we're going to remember him as a fan, right? Because that's how I want to remember Aaron Jones in the end of his Green Bay career. But I think that recency bias as a fan might also be playing into this.
You brought up
and a GM shouldn't be thinking that way.
Yep. And those are always the hard things. And what I said yesterday, and I'll repeat it really quickly here one more time too, is you and me and Alex and fan that's listening to this and everyone else, not one of us is always going to agree with every single move that the Packers make. And what I want is an understandable vision of what he was thinking in that moment. And I can understand the idea and the vision, even if I might disagree with it, even if I might have gone in a different direction. I can understand why he would want to go younger at that position with somebody who hasn't been quite as banged up, with somebody who is probably a little bit more built to handle the rigors of the NFL for a long. I can understand the vision for it. Again, even if I don't necessarily agree with it, I can understand it. But you bring up an interesting point. I don't know if you even wanted to necessarily go in this direction, Perri, but I want to talk about Keisean Nixon next. But before we get there, this is just an interesting, sort of situation where Keisean Nixon signs a 3-year, $18 million deal the day after you release Aaron Jones. I don't know if I'm crazy. If you told me that Aaron Jones signed a 3-year, $18 million deal, that could be $19.2 million, and that was the situation, and they let Keisean Nixon walk, I think we're having a lot different conversation today. I think everyone's really excited about Aaron Jones being back. I think everyone's excited that you've got this Jacobs and Jones tandem. I think everyone's insanely excited about Xavier McKinney as the new post safety, and that's the lead, right? That's what everyone's talking about. And I don't know that anyone's super upset that Keisean Nixon went to another team. And that's not to disparage Keisean Nixon. That's not to take away, and we'll get to his return in just a moment. But it is sort of this interesting timing, and all of these decisions ultimately go hand in hand. And I always talk about everything's a trade. If the trade to me is a 3-year, $18 million deal for Keisean Nixon or a 3-year, $18 million deal for Aaron Jones, I'm probably going Aaron Jones.
No doubt. I'm right there with you. I was thinking about that earlier too, Andy, right? And obviously the $6 million figure mark that averages out to also popped into my head, given the earlier conversation about Aaron Jones. I'm excited about Keisean Nixon on special teams, the 2-time All-Pro. But anyway, yeah, the Aaron Jones thing is just, this is going to bug me for a while. It'll probably be like the draft, and then I'll get over it. But the Aaron Jones part of this is going to bug me for a while, because think about the 45 minutes we had on Monday where we thought it was going to be Josh Jacobs and Aaron Jones. Maybe a little bit less than 45 minutes. God, that sounds like a championship recipe. So, yeah, that one's going to bug me.
Totally understandable. Perri, any final thoughts on Aaron Jones before we transition to the billion other things that have happened in the last 48 hours?
Yeah. I mean, I think I've said what I think. I do try to compartmentalize because so many great things did happen. And I also don't want this to taint how excited I am about Josh Jacobs joining the team, and that I do think he's a wonderful addition. I think of all of the free agent running backs, he is kind of the perfect fit for this team, and Goot taking a swing on, a player that is, after his rookie contract and right at his age. And, he was the best running back in the league in 2022, and that is what we should be excited about. So we're very lucky as fans to have players that we love so much and who have been with the team. I mean, this is a drafted player, a 5th round pick who has been with the Packers for his entire career now, who has grown into, a Pro Bowl household name, if you follow the league, our Walter Payton man. This is not just some random running back that got released yesterday. It's the guy that has been told who's described as the heart and soul of the locker room. So it's fair that we have taken 24 minutes already out of our very long agenda of this podcast to discuss this, because it's not your average release, and it's also very different from the David Bakhtiari release, which was like a little bit more expected and like we could have kind of seen coming, and is just like very unfortunate due to injury. You know, it's just so, it was shocking. But it doesn't take away from like how excited I am about all the other moves, because aside from the Aaron Jones thing, I think the Packers have like knocked free agency out of the park so far.
Can I give a really hot take really quick before that? I don't want to spend a ton of time on, but I'm going to drop anyway. I think the Packers kind of in a non-intentional way did David Bakhtiari dirty by not releasing him on like the Friday before, not because like he could sign early with another team, but David Bakhtiari in a way deserved his own day of like, the Packers have released David Bakhtiari. This is an end of an era and everything. And instead you had a day where Aaron Jones got released. You had a day where they signed Xavier McKinney and Josh Jacobs. And of course there's some other transactions as well that take place. And in a way, I kind of feel like Bakhtiari gets a little bit screwed over in the entire sauce, where like, we haven't even like remotely touched on this because it was the most predictable thing of anything that happened on the day, but it is still a major monumental moment in Packers, you know, in this era of Packers football, that the Packers released David Bakhtiari. And there was nothing that was going to happen from Friday to Monday that was going to change that entire situation. I don't think they did anything dirty. I don't think they did anything intentional. I don't think it was anything that we need to like, again, spend any real amount of time on here. We don't need to make something out of nothing, but I just wish in a way that they would have just released them on Friday so that we could have had that a little bit more of that moment to appreciate the Bakhtiari career rather than it just be grouped in with everything else that happened on Monday.
It's not a hot take. It's a very good take because I think we all fully agree on this.
Sometimes I think that like NFL teams need like people management for the general manager. You know, like somebody needs to be in the front office being like, all of your decisions are valid, but we need to like HR this a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, like if I was in there, I would have been like, yes, you can 100% release David Bakhtiari. However, give him his own day.
Just a little PR training. Just a little PR training.
Yeah.
It's just a little bit better bedside manner. Like they just need a little tweaking around the edges of like how you're going to do some of this stuff. That's it. You're going to do it anyway. We all understand it. It's not a big deal. And like I said, I really, really, really don't want to make something out of mostly nothing here, but it would have been nice if he just kind of had his own release. And I don't know, maybe he wouldn't want that. Maybe it ends up being better that you can, you know, release Aaron Jones and David Bakhtiari in one fell swoop. And I don't, maybe from a PR standpoint, that's actually better. I don't know. I didn't go to PR school, but from a fan standpoint, it would have been nice. Anyway, let's talk about Keisean Nixon. We obviously talked about the contract. It's a 6-year, $18 million that can go up to 19.2. I'm sure dependent upon some incentives and things like that. We don't know the exact terms of the contract yet, meaning what this contract actually looks like in reality. But just overarching thoughts, Keisean Nixon back with Green Bay. Alex, I will start with you this time.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's one I think we expected. I don't know. I was tinkering with the value of him because I didn't know how to play that out prior to the signing, but I'm really not a contract nerd either, so I don't know why I'm telling you this. But anyway, all good with Keisean Nixon. He's good on the return game. He provides some corner depth, but I would prefer not to see him a ton on defense and just rather see him return a bunch of kicks or touchdowns next year's. But I'm in on it. I don't think it's obviously not close to the biggest news of the week, but good news overall.
Perri Goldstein.
I'm happy he's back. I know that he's not like the biggest name that people wanted, as Andy mentioned, back in terms of the Packers free agents, but I think it's a really good move. You know, your cornerback depth gets like kind of shaky, as we saw, and he was really consistent this season in terms of being available, not necessarily playing on the field. But the contract itself kind of surprised me. It's like a big contract for Keisean Nixon, especially after getting like continuous 1-year deals. I'm not necessarily surprised that they want to keep him long term, but it was like a bigger number than I would have expected for Keisean, especially because to me, his primary role is as a returner. Like, to me, Keisean is like all pro returner, happens to also play slot corner. But they're paying him like a starting slot corner. And Andy, you had some great numbers that I'm sure you're going to go through in a second on like where he lands in terms of like league-wide slot corner status. And he's solid. And he lands in numbers wise pretty well because they paid, is Kenny Moore that got paid today too?
Yeah, about 10 million per.
Right. So like he's right, like kind of where he should be in terms of the market. I still don't know if I want him to be the Packers starting slot corner next season, though. That's the thing. So maybe there's somewhere in there where like Jeff Hafley like really sees a role and like value for him, and it's like just to remain to be seen. But the number's a lot higher than I was expecting. But I'm happy he's back.
Yeah. So one of the things I pointed out, and actually I started this when I was going through free agent options for the Packers, because one of the things I'm looking for is potential slot corners, right? You mentioned Kenny Moore. I'm just going through and I'm looking at, potential slot corners that you could have in free agency. And I'm like, all right, it's Kenny Moore. And then it's like, oh, it's kind of just like Kenny Moore. And then you get to Keisean Nixon and, Trey Herndon is very down on the list. And there's a couple other guys. It dries up very, very fast. And then I'm starting looking, I'm like, oh, who are the really good ones in the league? And of course we know McDuffie from the Chiefs, Branch from the Lions played it very well a season ago. There's certainly a handful of guys, but you very quickly realize that number one, there's not a lot. And when you have one, you hold on to them and do everything in your power to keep them on your team. And then number two is that even the best ones, we talked about Kenny Moore. For example, last year, Kenny Moore gave up in the slot a passer rating of 96.2. Keisean Nixon was 96.6. And like Trent McDuffie was over 90. Like it's not to say that he's Kenny Moore. It's not to say that he's Trent McDuffie. He's not. He just isn't. But that position is extremely hard to play, and you're going to get beat a lot of times because there's just so many super talented players, and there's so many varieties of players. You can go against big slots, small slots, shifty slots, the Wes Welker types, the Christian Watson types, like the Alan Lazard physical types. You can go against tight ends. You can go against McCaffrey. You can go against like so many different types of players in that role, and none of them are great matchups more often than not. Justin Jefferson, like we can go on, and you're going to end up with a variety of awful matchups. I think Nixon was a slightly below average slot corner. He played more slot snaps than any player in the NFL last year. I did think he played some of his best football towards the end of last year, which was an encouraging sign. I do think it's also worth noting that this is a player that has a ton of overall value. You can put him at kick returner. You can put him at punt returner. You can put him on teams. We saw them run a play for him on offense last year. Quite frankly, if they didn't have 6-7 wide receivers that all needed playing time, I'd probably like to see that more. And then, of course, he can play on defense as well. But a variety of different things you can use him for. And I think what this allows you to do is this allows you to go into the draft knowing that you've got Valentine, Nixon, Jair, Stokes backing him up. And then then you can go get a corner. And if they beat out Nixon, great. Then that's going to be your starting slot. If they beat out Valentine and Nixon's better than Valentine performs, then great. That player can go out and be the replacement for Valentine, whatever it might be. But it potentially gives you options then, dependent upon who's available and who you get in the draft.
I agree. I still would like to see them draft someone because I think this is also a good draft to go grab a slot corner, but it also takes the pressure off whoever that draft pick is, that you're not immediately having to start them, which is just never a good thing. I also, just side note, love that like your immediate first example for like someone you go against in the slot is Wes Welker, who hasn't been in the league in.
I said the Wes Welker types. Wes Welker types.
I know, but like he is always and forever going to like define what like the original slot.
The greatest slot of all time. Greatest slot of all time.
I think. I don't know. I'm not doing this debate right now. I don't think that's true.
Alex is thinking way too hard now.
Yeah, I am. Let's save this for an episode in like June when we have nothing to talk about.
When we do our episode where we have to ask each other like 5 random questions and we don't get to prepare for it, Alex is going to put it down. Who's the best slot receiver of all time? We're going to have to like pause for like 30 minutes while we go research. He's
writing it down.
Thoughts on Nixon, Alex? Did we already go through? I can't even remember. This is why I'm just blacking out on episodes.
I started. I give it a thumbs up. Not 2 thumbs up, but I give it 1 thumbs up.
All right. We quickly had another Packers corner sign back, Corey Ballantyne. My guess is this is going to be a very cheap veteran type deal. They officially announced Tyler Davis returning. And then in classic Packers moving on form, Jonathan Owens goes to the Chicago Bears. And not only do we have to sit with Aaron Jones in a purple sombrero, we have to sit with Simone Biles wearing Bears colors and whatever else that is going to be very, very hard to swallow as well. But thoughts on Ballantyne, Tyler Davis, Jonathan Owens? Perri, you can go first.
All good. Happy to have some good teamers back. Fine with Jonathan Owens. I mean, I think I read that they wanted to get him, but the Bears offered a better deal. Fine, I
want to pause you there, because that is 1,000,000% true. And he got a 2-year, $4 million deal. So if they wanted him back, it was very clearly at a complete vet minimum sort of deal, which is,
Which again, fine. I mean, I go get your money. I'm more upset about Simone Biles not being at Lambeau. It's fine.
Totally understandable. Alex?
You're excited about Simone Biles not being at Lambeau?
More upset.
Oh, more upset. Yeah, I was going to ask you what gave you the bigger headache today. Was it Simone Biles with the Bears or Aaron Rodgers for vice president? I'm kidding. Let's not even touch that with a 10-foot pole. Okay, so all good for the most part. I think, right? Corey Ballantyne adds depth at corner, which is a position of need in terms of depth. That's good. Tyler Davis, great. Good to have him back after the ACL tear. And Owens, not a big loss, although obviously I think there's only technically now 3 once McKinney officially signs safeties under contract, but I'm sure they'll address that depth probably next week and then into the draft. So nothing major in these notes.
How dare you forget Zane Anderson? He is a real person.
Oh, yeah. He is a real person.
On his name.
It's a miss by each of us today, Andy.
We're all in the same boat. We're all just trying to get through this and try not to forget every single thing that's going on at the moment. But yeah, Jonathan Owens moving on. Great. I'm not certainly worried about him being a Chicago Bear. I'm also mostly satisfied with the fact that very clearly Green Bay was completely unsatisfied with their safety room, which was the right play to make. Rudy Ford's the only one that's still out there. They let Dallin Levitt go midseason, Tavares Moore before the season. Jonathan Owens is now a Bear. Darnell Savage is now in Jacksonville. I'm very happy that they're going in an overall overhaul with that position. That's, I think, probably what I'm most excited about there. But yeah, Corey Ballantyne back. That's the ideal number 6 corner where he can be a core special teamer. And we saw him last year. If you need to play him for a 3-game stretch at corner, they can go out and win football games with him at corner. That's a really nice player to have on your roster. And also probably with a deal that he's going to still have to earn his spot in training camp, dependent upon all the players that they get in undrafted free agency, or excuse me, undrafted free agency and the draft and everything like that. So totally cool with everything that they did on that side of things. All right, we are already 37 minutes in. We have not touched base on really much of David Bakhtiari other than the little tangent I went on. Josh Jacobs, he's a Packer. Xavier McKinney, also a Packer. Darnell Savage, we just talked about, is gone. John Runyon Jr. is gone. I just want to open the floor to you. There was a lot that happened on Monday. Alex, I will start with you. What were your overarching takeaways from everything that took place on Monday? We obviously spent a ton of time on Aaron Jones already, but outside of that, your excitement level, your disappointment level, where are you at with everything?
Yeah, we talked about the disappointment level in terms of Jones. Otherwise, I was super thrilled with Goody and the front office's performance on Monday, right? I think Goody's pushing the chips in the middle of the table and saying the championship window's open, baby, right? He's taking a big swing at debatably the biggest name at safety on the market in McKinney, and Josh Jacobs, one of the better running backs on a great running back market this year, as that pendulum has kind of swung back now, where teams are again valuing veteran running backs. So I love both of those moves. The Bakhtiari one, I'm not going to say anything here that we haven't said over the course of the last 2 months when it comes to him. But to your point earlier, where we just didn't have a lot of time to properly say thank you to a guy that was a 5-time All-Pro in Green Bay and on a Hall of Fame trajectory, it's another one that sucks, right? His knee was just never able to go the last couple of years. And I hope he has a great second act elsewhere. I hope the best for him, as long as it's not Minnesota or Chicago. I hope the best for Bakhtiari. So all of the above was good. I mean, you saved $20 million on that move, by the way, too. So obviously that's good from a cap standpoint. And to take those 2 big swings on day 1 of the legal tampering period, I love it by Goody, man. He was cooking on Monday.
Perri?
I mean, this is the biggest day in his tenure, I'd say. I mean, we always think about that 2019 free agency, but this is it. This tops it. I know it was really only 2 players that he signed. It feels like a lot, right? There were releases and players signed elsewhere, but like it has been 2 players. It has been Josh Jacobs and it's been Xavier McKinney. I love both signings. I normally feel actually like teams that go all in on day one, I find questionable. Green Bay is normally not that team. They usually sit back, they wait, they see, they want to see where the market falls. I don't think they overpaid for either. I love both contracts. Russ Ball, our king. Because, I think the Josh Jacobs signing on paper looks like, whoa, but it's really only like a 2-year deal. They can get out of it after 2 years. It's not a lot of guaranteed money. I think Xavier McKinney is getting paid exactly what he's worth. He's the best safety available. He's been PFF's, whether you do what you will with PFF's ratings, but like best safety rated in PFF since he's like entered the league. He is the perfect fit for the perfect fit for this defense. Like you could not have gone again, like free agency is about like going and finding players that fit your team. It's not necessarily always about just like going to get who's like top dog on the market, right? Like, is it about cap space and it's about value add and it's about scheme fit and like everything about the Xavier McKinney signing fits all of those things. I am so pumped. Like I need to dive into the film because unpacks what she said. We're gonna do, an overview on the 2 new guys, maybe 3. Who knows who they're gonna sign next? Keeping us on our toes. But like, I was ready to be let down because they're always in, on the big names, and then they never get them. But this was the year that they got the big name. And we have a new defensive coordinator. And again, like we'll have to see on paper, or on paper right now it looks good. We'll have to see on the field like how it all shakes out. But like Xavier McKinney and Jair Alexander are about to play in a secondary together. That is awesome. And we have been waiting for playmakers on this defense. We've had the Packers have had really good players, really like high athletic players, and kind of been waiting for everyone to put it together. Like Xavier McKinney is an undeniable playmaker. And I think when you have someone like that, it will have a trickle-down effect to the rest of your players as well. I think you will see Jair Alexander be able to make more plays because of his ability. Like you will see hopefully like a Quay Walker take that next step because he will have someone behind him where he needs to be, make him play. Like it's just going to have, I'm being very optimistic now, like a really amazing effect. So I am pumped. And I think like the Packers got just like really great value. They didn't overpay anybody. They made their 2 big splashes and now they can go and add, like, I think they still have some money to play with. I'd like to see them add a player or 2. Wait to see who's still available. Add another safety, maybe a linebacker, but they filled 2 like huge needs, like 2 huge holes. And they didn't overpay. Win.
Yeah, total win.
I do think Xavier McKinney has the ability to be a bit of a force multiplier for this defense and make a lot of the players around him better. To your point, Perri, the other thing I will say, and I touched base on this a little bit with McKinney, but when you do lose a player like Aaron Jones, and you're looking at, some of how is it going to affect the locker room and things like that? They signed 2 players that are team captains. He's got the C on the Josh Jacobs jersey. You got the C on the Xavier McKinney jersey. They're adding some leadership to that team as well. And specifically on the defensive side of the ball, I think that's going to be incredibly important with Xavier McKinney. They needed, again, you could not have drawn up a better player, team captain, 100% of the snaps last year, plays undeniable coverage on the back end, can play post safety, can play some box safety, can match up with tight end, can do everything. You just could not have drawn it up any better. And when we're talking about a free agency where a Robert Hunt is getting a 5-year, $100 million contract, Christian Wilkins is getting paid $1 bazillion. Like, and I'm not saying even necessarily that those guys don't deserve it or whatever. I'm just saying that this is still one of those positions where you can get a great player and like, yeah, 17 mil, that's a lot of money per season. I'm not saying it's not, but it's still a little bit depressed in comparison to some of those other super high-end positions. And I still think that there is value there. And when you can again, paint the perfect picture of exactly what you want, and he fits it to a T, and that player has just happened to be out there in free agency, you go and attack it. That's what Goot did, and I could not be more excited about that.
Right, real quick, just to go back to something Perri said, and I'll keep it quick. Goody with some money to play with is something he's been so good at over the years. We talked about it a ton over the years we've worked together. Low risk, high reward moves. As this gets into week 2 of free agency, I imagine we'll see a couple trickle in, and maybe they don't pay off, but hopefully they do. So I'm really excited to see what he does here in terms of like depth pieces over the course of the next couple of weeks at some of those positions of need.
It's a phenomenal point, because as great as it, or I don't even want to say that, like sometimes it's easy to go and get the big guys, right? You've got money, you sign the big check. Where Green Bay has really set themselves apart is finding the Devondre Campbell on a 1-year, $2 million deal and making him into having him become an all-pro, finding a Rasul Douglas on the practice squad, finding a Bo Melton on a practice squad, finding Rick Wagner on a super cheap deal that plays significant snaps on a team that obviously went to the NFC Championship game and had every opportunity to win it. Like, those are the type of deals that they've done such a tremendous job on. And imagine if you can have this sort of offseason with the big spending, and they can go out and have a draft like they did last year, which is, again, that's a really high bar to set, but they can have a really good draft. If they can find a couple of those Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell, Rick Wagner type signings, man, just think of where this team could potentially be. That's very pie in the sky. That's very optimistic. I'm not saying all those things are going to happen, but they have a track record for finding good players in the draft, good players on the scrap heap. Keisean Nixon, another great example of that. And hopefully they can continue to do that as well. And if they can, like I said, look the heck out. Really quick sort of lightning round here. Perri, we're going to go one-on-one here. Perri, how would you rate the Packers from prior to free agency starting until right now? Obviously, some key players gone, some key players added. Better, worse, same? Where are you at?
Better, definitely better. They're undeniably a better football team. Aaron Jones hurts, but B+.
All
right.
Just
because of Aaron Jones.
Alex, my question for you, what do you feel best about and what do you feel worst about so far?
Well, you know what I feel worst about, right? It's Aaron Jones, just that whole situation. But obviously, like I said earlier, I think you still upgraded at running back, but it's just the sentimental tie that we have as fans. Best about, let's go Xavier McKinney. I think you improved that position, one that we railed on last offseason. So to see a top dog like McKinney come in to that room, I feel really, really good about.
I want both of your answers on this one. Alex, you can go first. A player or a position that you still want to see Green Bay attack via free agency, trade, etc., prior to the draft.
Yeah, let's go inside linebacker. I think some depth there would be good. I really like Isaiah McDuffie, but with Devondre Campbell out, I'd just like to see some extra depth there.
Love it. Perri?
Isaiah Simmons.
Inside
linebacker can also maybe play little safety. You need a second safety, right? Because that room is still not full. You also need inside linebacker. Maggie and I are really high on that hybrid situation. Jeremy Chin's off the market, so those were our two. Isaiah Simmons.
Simmons is an interesting one. I'm going to throw a name out there that I don't think Green Bay would really do, especially with just jettisoning their older players. I kind of really want Bobby Wagner. on like a 1-year deal. And here's why. One, I think you'd be a great fit as like a veteran in just the middle of that defense. You get your guy in McKinney on the back end. You've got obviously some guys up front and your Kenny Clarks, your Rashawn Garys, your Preston Smiths that are going to be, but that second level guy in Bobby Wagner. And I actually kind of sneakily think the tag team with Bobby Wagner and Quay Walker would be low key kind of awesome. And I think we saw Patrick Queen get better when they went out and got Roquan Smith, somebody that could be that sort of mentor and that could be that big time guy next to him. Now, Roquan's better certainly at that stage of his career than where Bobby Wagner is now, but Wagner is great because of his instincts and his playmaking ability and so many of those things. He was great last year, even though he's been a little bit of a step slower. We don't need, to see him play, a bazillion snaps and play every single nickel and dime, but I think that could be a fun tag team with Quay Walker in the middle of that defense. Isaiah McDuffie being the third guy. Not expecting it. Don't think they go and sign a 30-plus-year-old player. Don't think they're going to do the 1-year mercenary thing, but kind of sneakily want Bobby Wagner next to Quay Walker.
I'm sorry to report it's not happening. It's not happening.
Oh, he's old.
But I love it.
But I kind of want it. And there's no linebackers left. By the way, Packers apparently lost out on Josie Jewell. Per Albert Breer, they were in the conversation for him. The Carolina Panthers officially signed him or at least reportedly signed him. And that will come official on Wednesday, of course. But he becomes a Panther, not a Packer. And Green Bay still in search clearly of an off-ball linebacker. And Green Bay very clearly knows it as well, as they are trying to attack that market. And there's just not a whole heck of a lot left, which is, again, why Bobby Wagner a little bit on my mind, where I know, listen, guys, I lived through and I was at the game where I had to watch Hardy Nickerson with no knees try to chase Michael Vick in his prime at Lambeau Field in a playoff game. And it was the saddest thing I've ever seen on a football field, because it was just like, it might as well have been like my grandpa trying to chase Michael Vick in his prime. It just was not going to end well. And it did not end well. So I am not old linebacker aficionado. I'm not somebody that wants that on my team, but the Bobby Wagner one, a little bit interesting to me. All right. What else do I want to go over here really quick here? We went over the to-do list. We went over free agents you'd like Green Bay to sign. Yeah, I think that's kind of it. Kirk Cousins is gone. The Bears continue to be the Bears. Any other final thoughts on free agency, where Green Bay's at, where the division's at? Any crazy moves that really caught your fancy so far in this offseason? Anything you want to go over?
I mean, some things happen day 2. Like, I love Derrick Henry to the Ravens. I don't know. It's just the most like perfect fit I've ever seen in my life. Danielle Hunter is obviously also leaving the Vikings, which fine by me. Bye-bye. Going to the Texans. Also love that for the Texans. There's been some really nice moves. Patrick Queen switching over to the Steelers. Like you said, Andy, he's off the market. It's been a really fun free agency. But I think Alex made a really great point as like my final thought. I think Goot is making a statement in this offseason saying like, you may think like we had our fun last season coming onto the scene, et cetera, et cetera. No. The Packers are entering 2024 as contenders. Like, they're going for it in 2024. I like it. I like it a lot. I think they're right there. They're staying young, which, sorry, Andy, to your Bobby Wagner point.
Nope, it's legit.
I know. They're going for the young, and they're taking a big swing, and they're saying like, we're here to make the full push for a ring.
You did break our number one rule that we never compliment Alex, but I will forgive you this one time, since I know a lot's going on in the last 48 hours and we're all just a little bit discombobulated. But Alex, your final thought.
Hey, it took 52 minutes. So, I mean, we'll at least give ourselves some praise on that.
It took like 37 episodes and 52 minutes before we finally complimented you. Not just 52 minutes. Just kidding.
Great point. That's a great point. Okay, for that, I'm going to give you real quick random thoughts from across the NFL. I love what the Texans are doing. They acquired Joe Mixon. Perri just mentioned adding Hunter. I think that team's going to be really fun next year. Kirk Cousins to Atlanta. I like that for Atlanta. I hate it. Well, if you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, so I love it, but I hate it for Minnesota, who signed Sam Darnold. I assume they'll probably draft a quarterback, but Minnesota confuses the hell out of me as they lose Hunter and Cousins in the same offseason. And then Saquon to the Eagles. I think that one's really interesting, right? Like, we know what we're feeling as Packers fans with Aaron Jones going to the Vikings. Now Giants fans at least kind of feel similarly, despite the fact their team didn't give him what he's worth last year. So there's just a bunch of sporadic thoughts from all of NFL free agency. That is all. Goody, proven he's the man right now.
I'll make this short because I could go on this on a very long time, but from a Packers standpoint, absolutely love what the Chicago Bears are doing. I have no idea what the Chicago Bears are doing. We got through last year and they had $100 million to spend and the number 1 pick in the draft. Now, they did a beautiful job of getting number 1 pick this year to go get Caleb Williams, which I don't think they're going to screw up, but it's still the Bears, so you never quite know. But they did a really great job with that overall DJ Moore trade. But they go out and they spend multiple millions and millions of dollars on off-ball linebackers and non-premium position players, and we're just in this brutal no man's land. And then they get to this offseason and they've got another $100 million to spend. And you're thinking they're going to go out and they're going to get some big time premium talent, and they're going to get young talent like a Xavier McKinney or someone like that. And it is 30-plus-year-old Kevin Byard an old aging Gerald Everett at tight. I think he's only like 29, but still aging. They get Jonathan Owens. They get DeAndre Swift, a running back. We are once again talking about non-premium positions. We're talking about players that do not fit their current timeline. I don't want to spend any more time on it, but I have no idea what their vision is. It looks terrible at the moment, and I love that for Green Bay Packers fans. So I'll just leave it at that.
The only part you missed there, Andy, is I don't think Justin Fields has any trade value anymore either.
That's the other one too. Like there's literally there's nothing, and they're going to get a back of day 3 or like some sort of pick swap or something. There's no market for it. It's crazy.
It's nuts.
They also lost Darnell Mooney. Not that that means anything, but they're like losing premium position players.
Yeah. I do not understand. And like, I've been complimentary of some things that the Bears have done in the past. Like I said, the DJ Moore trade and being able to get to the number 1 pick in this draft based on Carolina's incompetence. Really mad at Carolina for allowing that all to happen. Thanks a lot. To go get Bryce Young. Oh my goodness. But Chicago's not made the most of it. I think they could have done some serious work last year and this year. They're still potentially in a really good spot if they get Caleb Williams and that works out. But I think it could have been a whole lot more devastating. And so far it has not been. You guys are the absolute best. I know we had a lot to talk about today. I'm so happy that we got to all talk about it together. Perri, where can we find all of your work on Packs What She Said, social media, anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, just follow me on Twitter at Perri_Goldstein. Follow the other podcast at PWSS Podcast. I will be dropping a recap episode with Maggie Loney over on YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts. Packs What She Said on YouTube.
Love it. Alex, what about you, buddy?
Does "you guys are the best" count as a compliment? If you're saying it to me and Perri collectively?
I was actually talking about Perri and her cat, but
okay.
If you want to take it your way as well, that's fine.
Got it. You can find me on Twitter at Alex_Strouf. I do the Mr. Relevant podcast 3 times a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, beginning at 12:30 Central on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Just search ESPN Madison, and we talk about all things Wisconsin sports, not just Packers on that podcast. So I do that 3 times a week, and go follow the shenanigans on Twitter.
Awesome. Cannot wait. Excited to talk to you guys again in a couple of weeks, and who knows where the heck the Packers will be by that time. Should be a ton of fun. Go out and follow all of their work. Perri is absolutely amazing. We'll be back here, like I said, in a couple of weeks. You can follow the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. You can follow me at Andy Herman NFL. That does it for us. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.